You're a University of Utah fan who wants to
Yeah.
see BYU lose.
And I want to see the Utes get a lot of great athletes and pay for them,
They will.
including gymnasts and track stars. They're sending
Yeah.
so many people to the Olympics from the University of Utah. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's pay them. I'm down
Okay.
for it. And if that means BYU sports dies, sorry, Cougar fans. Wah wah. Okay.
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Mormons with your favorite hosts of all, the twin siblings.
The thing I love most about you is you have just this overarching confidence. Well, it's like a misplaced confidence. Like, you're so confident. My family says this about me too. Like,
Yeah.
there's like a scale of mental health, and like on one end is like severe depression where you only hear like negative thoughts in your head. Mine's the far, far, far edge of that. The
Yeah.
opposite, where it's like I only hear really great things about myself when I'm talking to myself. And it probably actually is another form of mental illness, but nobody addresses it because, like, why would that be a problem? It's not a problem. But
It's
yeah,
not.
I'm way overly
We're
positive
very confident.
and positive. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
I would imagine our listeners are well aware of that at this point. The only people I can sense that are not aware of that is we did that interview with Taylor Hill, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of new listeners who caught that interview on YouTube. And I can tell from some of their comments that they're kind of like, I wouldn't say they don't get me. I think they get me kind of well, but they're mostly like, Matt is a mean person. Matt is an unkind person.
You're not
So
mean. You're not unkind. You just you go through the world in a different way than a lot of people.
I just see things differently than a lot of
Yeah,
people do. Yeah. I never ever intend to be mean. The last thing I want to do is
of
hurt
course.
anybody's feelings. But
Yeah.
sometimes I just say, actually, I think, Melissa, I feel like I'm saying what everybody else is thinking inside,
Oh,
but
do
they have
you?
a filter that tells them to stop saying it, and I don't
Oh,
have that filter.
yeah. I don't know if that's true. I think yeah, I don't I think it's maybe I look at it a little bit differently, okay? You're not ever intentionally trying to hurt somebody's feelings. I know that
No,
about you. Like, you're actually very compassionate and thoughtful and empathetic. The thing is that you don't hold in your mind responsibility for the way that other people respond, right? That's
that's
not
right.
your responsibility. That's their
Mhm.
responsibility. And
Mhm.
so when you say, like, I would never intentionally hurt somebody's feelings, you're not saying something that you think would hurt their feelings. But if their feelings are hurt, you're like, well, maybe that's on them a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Would that mean I lack empathy? This is my challenge is that my wife will tell me, you by what you said, you implied this and this and this. And I say,
Mm,
no, I cannot imply something I did not intend to imply. And
mm,
she's like,
mhm.
yes, you can, because because you said this, and this is how everybody else would interpret that. And I'm like, but I didn't mean to say that, and so I didn't say that.
Right.
I
And so
said,
you don't hold yourself responsible for how people interpret what you didn't mean for them to interpret, right?
yeah,
I
right,
think that's okay. People just need to understand that about you. I'm a lot like
yeah,
that too. Yeah.
yeah. Hey, so are you enjoying your summer break, Melissa?
Oh my goodness, I love summer so much. Yes. Okay, so it's officially day 4 of my summer, and every single day I just try to make sure that I make it count. Like, I pack everything in because, again, summer is so important to me. As a teacher, I understand, like, it is such a benefit to have a job where you get a 2-month break every year. Like,
Yeah.
I like, that's honestly why I stay in teaching almost exclusively. Is because
It's not the high pay that you get?
there's a lot of benefits to being a teacher, but the number one is this summer break. And so, like, I'm not kidding, Matt. Like, I'm up at 5 a.m. every day because I don't want to waste a single second of sunlight. I usually start with a long hike because I love to hike. I love to be outside, and I like to get it done before anybody else gets on the trails. And then I go home and do a little bit of gardening, a little bit of weeding, and then I have a summer project that I'm working on. This summer, I'm learning how to use an Adobe program called InDesign.
Uh-huh. That's a
Um,
good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. I haven't had time to learn it before, so I'm working on learning that and improving some of my photography skills and some of my design skills. So that's my summer project. So I'll work on that for a little bit. Then I'll usually go to the pool and swim a little bit. Then I usually try to meet one of my adult kids for lunch sometime during the week and go for a walk on their lunch or something like that. And then I try to do an afternoon walk with my dog. I'm not kidding. I pack everything in. And then
Your day
yeah,
sounds
so
exhausting.
as much
It's
sun as I can have. But yeah, and then I've got a big stack of books I'm reading this summer. So it's day 4. I've read 6 books so far. So
wow.
yeah, I'm
You
loving it.
Melissa, this is how you are when you're on vacation too. This
Yeah.
is how you are when you're on cruises, where people are like, "Hey, let's go sit by the pool and let's like take it easy and sleep in late and do
Nope.
nothing all day."
Nope. Nope. First one off the boat. When we're at a port, first one off the boat. I have to be first off and last one back on. Like, I am in those ports all day long on my
Yeah.
feet, exploring, wandering. I'm not going to, like, a beach to sit. Nope. If I
Mhm.
hit a beach, we're gonna be snorkeling or something like that. But yeah, I love summer, but I don't love the laziness of it. I love the ability to be outside and to be warm. I feel alive, man. I feel alive.
That's because you live in Cache Valley and it's icy
Mm.
cold for clear. Probably didn't even get warm until at the end of May for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you have to
So
take advantage of the warmth.
yeah. Thanks for asking. Thanks for listening to my long response.
Hey, well, let's get to the news. The first story I have is really quick.
Okay,
President Nelson is turning 9, or sorry, no,
9.
uh,
That's great.
President Nelson is turning 100 years old on September 9th. So 9
Okay.
9 24, he turns 100 years old. And he's asked us all to give him a birthday present. You want to guess what
Ooh,
it is?
birthday present to President Nelson. I assume it's a challenge. He wants us to do something.
No,
I
he
don't think
wants
he
to
wants a
die
bunch
of.
of presents sent to his office, although
he
if that's
said,
your love language, that's your love language. I'm not mocking it. That's great.
He said, I've been living healthy too long. I've made it to 100 years old. Now I'm going to indulge. And he just wants candy and
Andy.
fatty foods. He wants to put his heart to the test.
Uh-huh,
No,
yeah.
no. He wants us to be kind to other people. He wants us to do an act of kind service to other people for his
Okay.
birthday present.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does he want us to, like, tell him about it? Because remember, I think it was President Monson when he was turning some age, he was like, "Send me a note that tell me what you did," or something like that.
Oh, his birthday is a ways away. So I think he wants us to sort of plan it in advance. He
Okay.
hasn't told us how to tell him that we did it for his birthday, but I'm going to guess the social media crowd at the
Mhm.
church is
Mhm.
going to have some way of like letting everybody know because it's the thing that Jesus would do. Help somebody out and then tell everybody about it.
I mean, I think there is something to be said for when you share about it, then gives it momentum and pushes other people
Oh,
to do it. So,
that's
yeah.
true.
Yeah, okay. Um, I have a story about some missionaries, 2 companions who died in a car crash. So the missionaries were serving in North Dakota. Tommy Gardner's from Riverton, Utah, and Jacob Kessler from Ely, Nevada. Unfortunately, both were killed in a traffic accident. They hit into a big semi truck that was stopped on the highway. It says they hit the truck at regular highway speeds.
Ooh,
So they're kind of investigating what was the cause of the crash. But at any rate, terrible story for their
yeah.
families. Obviously, it's so hard to lose anybody, but when they're serving a
Hmm.
mission, that's I'm sure difficult. And then the church did say that this is the 5th missionary death this year, at least the 5th one that has been public. Another couple died earlier this
A
year,
senior couple.
a senior couple, and then another elder from who was serving in New Jersey died from a sudden medical emergency. I mean, missionaries are going to die, like people are going to die even if they're on a mission. I do think the
Yeah.
statistics are pretty low of how many missionaries die per how many are serving, but yeah,
It's
just
just
I think
tragic,
it's
right?
notable. Yeah. Mhm.
Um, so when my daughter was on her mission, we saw so many blessings that came to us from having her serving a mission. And I
Mhm.
imagine that everybody who has a child out serving a mission, they feel those blessings. And one of the things you're always hoping and praying for is that the Lord will protect your kids and keep them
Yeah.
safe. And
Yeah.
you almost kind of expect it. And so then when that doesn't happen, that has to just be so
Yeah, you're
tough.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my next story is a little happier than that.
Okay.
By the way, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the missionaries that died and all of their friends. It's got to be tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Elder Suarez traveled to the South Pacific to celebrate 180 years of the church in French Polynesia.
Okay.
So to
Is
me, the
French
cool thing,
Polynesia, is that different than Polynesia?
well, it's like Tahiti. It's like South Pacific.
Oh, okay. Samoa, Tonga, those kind of
Hmm.
places. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha. Okay,
Tahiti.
cool. Okay, because
So
that makes more sense that the church has been there 180 years. Okay.
yeah, Addison Pratt was one of the first missionaries there, and he arrived in 1844, I think they said. That would
Wow.
make sense since it's 2024. So that would be just like 14 years after the church is organized.
Yeah.
Missionaries are going on boats to French Polynesia. Like, I'm okay. So, as an adult, as a senior couple, I can't think of anything more fun than being a
Yeah.
missionary in French Polynesia. But when I'm in the 1800s and I'm leaving my family and I don't know when I'm coming, like that's a scary prospect.
And that's so far away.
Yeah. And getting like communication would be so difficult. Like everything about it would be so difficult. On the other hand, the saints in French Polynesia are so dedicated. Like they're
Mhm.
such good members of the church from those regions
Yeah,
that are
and the
just like,
church is really strong and stable.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. That
Okay.
it's a quick clip, so we'll move on.
Okay. So when we recorded last time, we talked about where the church is growing a lot, like where
Hmm.
demographically it's growing a lot. And one of the places we mentioned is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I thought this story was of note. Just recently, the Book of Mormon was translated into the language they speak there. So, do you want to
Mm,
hear the name of the language is Chichiluba?
I
Probably,
bet that's
probably
exactly
not.
how. You
Yeah.
know what, Melissa, this is amazing. You said that without any accent at all. You sounded
Yeah.
exactly
Just like
like you were from the Democratic Republic of
yeah,
Congo.
yeah.
That's impressive.
I think it's awesome that we've, finally gotten that translation done. I think it's amazing that the church has been growing even without that translation. And I'm sure that a lot of people there are bilingual and have been able to read in other languages, but I think it's great that that translation got done for them. So cool.
So again, Temple news. There's always a lot of Temple news. I'm going to hit
Mhm.
four of them real fast, and
Okay.
you can tell me if you want to talk about any of them in more depth.
Okay.
Okay, Elder Gong dedicated the Taylorsville, Utah temple. The Teton River Temple in Rexburg had a groundbreaking ceremony on Saturday.
Okay.
There's opposition to the McKinney, Texas temple. And if you'd like to see a video of the Provo temple being demolished, we have a link to that in our show notes.
Okay. I'm good. That was all real
Yeah.
self-explanatory. Thank
Yep.
you. Yeah,
Sure.
sounds good. Thanks for that update. Matt, do you remember when we were, in high school? This is gonna embarrass both of us, but it's fine. We were both in choir as one of our
Yes.
extracurricular pursuits,
That is
right?
not embarrassing. That's like the highlight
That's
of
not
my
the
life.
embarrassing part. The embarrassing part is that, man, would we sing and dance, okay? Like,
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
had a really great choir director, and she would teach us little, like, moves to go with each dance, and it was kinda like
Mhm.
a production, like, we'd go around and, like, sing and dance
It's called a
and
show choir.
a show choir, thank you, and sometimes you and I were partners as
Yeah,
the dancers, right?
because we were the best dancers.
And they'd put us right on the front row.
Yeah, because we're good at it.
'Cause we're maybe too confident again. Anyways, and then our mom, who's very musical, sometimes she would take us around to rest homes to
Yes.
show choir just as a family, like, just to
Yeah.
be, like, kind to people, the elderly who were in rest homes. We'd go put on shows as a family sometimes in those.
It
Yeah.
was a gift to President Nelson for his birthday before he even knew he wanted it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So the part that's embarrassing, Matt, is that sometimes we would sing songs that maybe a brother and a sister shouldn't sing together.
Well,
Examples? Examples?
Islands in the Stream?
Islands in the Stream. Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton. Islands in the Stream, that is what we are. Listeners, I'll let you look up the lyrics, but if you can imagine that song and a young teenage brother and sister singing that at a rest home, so embarrassing.
Uh,
Why did we think that was appropriate? Not appropriate.
I don't pay
Um,
attention to the words I'm singing. I just focus on the technique,
and the
doing
dance
it.
moves, and the
That's right,
dance moves.
making sure that it's a good show. We also would sing Light a Rose from The Music
Oh,
Man.
yeah, Light a Rose,
Mhm.
home again, Rose.
I would get
I
on my knees and propose to you.
That's right, and I'll pop the question, and then I would act all surprised. Man, we had a
Mhm.
childhood.
Yeah, we
I
were
also
good.
remember you had a very high falsetto, and you would sing Duke of Earl.
That was just called prepubescent. I was a late bloomer.
I see. I see. What does this have to do with anything?
I don't
Anything at
know.
all?
I'm waiting for the news story.
Matthew, here's our opportunity. Would you like to be in the Tabernacle choir?
No.
Yes.
Well, I kind of grew out of this phase of having people tell
Yeah.
me what to do.
I haven't sung forever and ever. But Matt,
I
applications are now open through mid-August. We could apply to be in the Tabernacle choir.
So, Melissa, I was in my ward choir. I think I told you this.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
called / commanded to
By
be in the ward.
force.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I participated in the ward choir. And that ward still like broadcasts sacrament meeting because there are a lot of elderly people who can't come to church.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we would perform in the choir, and I would go to YouTube and download these choir things,
Uh-huh.
and then I have them on my YouTube channel just to watch so that I can show people how horrible we were as a choir. Like
But
I
ward
think
choirs aren't good. Ward choirs aren't good, but the Tab Cats, they're good.
I will send them my audition from this ward choir, and they'll be like, "This is awful, awful, awful music. Why are you
Mm.
sending this to us?" And I'll be like, "Because what I did for them, I could do for you too."
Okay.
And they'll say, we're not looking to ruin the choir."
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
maybe when they need a show choir, a show Tab
We would be
Cats,
so good.
we could join in.
I I bet I could get David Archuleta to come back for one show. I'll say, "Look, David, me and my sister, we're gonna dance, and you can bring whoever you want to dance with us, and we're gonna put on a show. We're
Okay.
gonna show the Tabernacle how to really do a show choir."
Okay. Okay. For those of you who would seriously like to consider applying for the Tabernacle Choir, which I think it's a great opportunity. Here's the qualifications, okay? You have to be between 25 and 55 years old, okay? You can't be
Check.
too old. Okay, but Matt, you've only got about a decade left, okay? Um,
Less.
you need to currently reside within 100 miles of Temple Square.
Not check. I don't do that.
Okay, you could move. You also need to be prepared for at least 5 years of being in the choir. So you have to be in the choir for at least 5 years, no more than 20 years. Okay?
Mm.
Yeah? You have to be able to sight read extraordinarily well. Do
Okay,
you know
can't
what's
do that.
crazy? The application process takes 8 months. There's 4 stages that you have to get through. It's a big deal. Anyway,
Melissa, I think we do this story every year when they have their open audition
okay,
call.
Matt, it doesn't matter. It
Okay.
doesn't matter. This could be the year.
This could be
the year.
if only I had more commitment or willingness to live within 100 miles of Tabernacle or Salt Lake City.
Okay, maybe this isn't the time for you.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, fine.
Maybe I miss. Okay. The handbook has been updated, the church handbook. So
The
we have
General
links to
Handbook
it.
of Instructions?
They just call it the general handbook, I think.
Oh, okay, okay.
They call it the general handbook.
Yeah, okay.
So if you look on this story about what the updates are, they've redefined the purpose of the primary. I can
Oh,
read what the purpose of the
yes,
primary
please
is
do.
now. Well, I can't tell that what they've changed. Like, I really
Oh,
wish that they would tell me what it used to say and what it says now.
but
But I
all they
only get
say
to
is
read.
that it's been updated?
Hmm.
I'll
And
tell
they
you
up.
something.
Hmm.
Well, okay, so they're no longer calling it Young Men's and Young Women's Program.
They're calling it the Covenant Path.
Nope, worse.
What?
You're not supposed to refer to them as young men and young women anymore. You're supposed to refer to them as the rising generation. For
Okay.
reals. It sounds like it's a joke, huh?
Yeah.
No, it's for reals. That's what it is, the rising generation. So everywhere it used to say young men and young women in the handbook, it now says the rising generation.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now listen to this. This is one of the stories on the church news of what the updates say.
Okay.
Baptized and confirmed primary children are members of the church.
Uh-huh.
As such, bishops, stake presidents, and primary presidents can invite these children to more fully participate in their meetings. And it looks like
What
we
does
have
that
looked
mean?
at meetings that we attend, starting with sacrament meeting and stake conferences, and we have asked ourselves the question, what are we doing in this meeting to nourish everyone?
Hmm.
And so I think choirs of primary children can sing in meetings. Christ
Okay.
centered primary songs can be sung by the congregation. And
Mm-hmm.
in a recent sacrament meeting, a new bishop announced that the congregation would sing a primary song because he wanted the children to know they were a part of the church.
Okay.
Wait. The handbook now says any baptized member may offer an opening or closing prayer in a church meeting. including newly baptized 8-year-old children.
Interesting. Okay.
And they could give a talk in sacrament meeting.
Okay, this is going to make being a member of the bishopric so much better because now you
Yeah.
have so many more people you could reach out to give an opening and closing prayer.
I'm trying to think. I think we had a kid in our ward say a prayer recently, and I was a little bit surprised by that. But now I know it's a new thing in the church policies that kids can speak in sacrament as long
Okay.
as they've been baptized and they can give prayers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. I'm in favor of that change. I think that's great.
So,
They're
Melissa,
almost part of the rising generation after all. Yes, Matt.
sorry to interrupt.
You're good.
Normally we do famous Mormons.
Can we skip? Are we not
We're
going
going to
to?
skip this week, but I just want listeners to know somebody snitched this idea from us. Somebody stole famous Mormons from us. We're not skipping it this week because we're yielding this segment to another podcast that stole the idea from us. We're just skipping because we have other things we want to talk about this week.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Thank you. You're fun. Okay. So it's time for big deal, little deal, no deal. I'm going to go first. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I always like it when we have music to introduce our subjects. Is the best music I've ever heard, but I'll allow it.
Big deal.
Okay. Okay. So Matt, here's your headline. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which companies and or products does the LDS Church invest in?
Mm-hmm.
Big deal, little deal, no deal. 3, 2, 1.
No deal.
Big deal.
Oh, really? Big deal?
Yeah, it's
Who
a big
cares?
deal.
Who cares what they invest in?
Okay, Matt, let me just take us through history a little bit. Normally, this is your job, but I will do it. Okay, here's the thing, Matt. For so long, we didn't know how the LDS Church spent its tithing money, right?
True.
Everybody was like, we don't know. And people would do these secret Google searches and be like, oh yeah, did you know the church owns Burger King? That's when I remember.
It's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. So then they had like these financial scandals and
Mm-hmm.
people were like, you just need to be more transparent. And now the church is more transparent. And so now we can see what it's actually investing all of its money in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so great. That's awesome. So now we actually know for sure what they're investing in. Oh, wait, do you want to guess what they're mainly investing in?
I know this because I read these kinds of stories all the time.
Okay, sure.
So we're going to say they invest in meta platforms and in
Meta platforms. What does
so
that mean?
Facebook and Instagram, like that company.
Kind of. Okay. Go on.
Google or
Okay.
Alphabet.
Okay.
They're investing in Apple,
Okay.
Nvidia.
None of those are in these stories.
Oh, okay.
But you're kind of close. But this is why I think it's a big deal. Okay. Well, so yeah, they're investing in pharmaceuticals, which is
Oh,
interesting, right? Like a lot of pharmaceuticals, including things like, cures for cancer. I
wow.
think it's interesting because pharmaceuticals are expensive.
Risky. Yeah.
They're a little bit risky too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're investing in pharmaceuticals, a lot of different pharmaceutical companies.
It's almost as if they have billions of dollars to throw around in their investments.
Yeah, but I think it's important to say, like, they're not just throwing money around, right? Like, they're making money on their investments for the
Yes.
large part, right?
Yeah.
They're also investing in okay, there's 2 things that I think are somewhat controversial. Do you know what a chum box is?
No.
Okay, so this is something I don't like that the church is investing in, and maybe to you this is couched under like Meta or like Google, but Chumbox is those ads that pop up. They're like clickbait, so advertising. Okay, so the
Mm-hmm.
church has a lot of money in Chumbox companies, especially one. So all of those ads that pop up that are like trying to get you to click on it,
Mm-hmm.
that's advertising, and that is where the church has a lot of its money in. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
interesting because to me, a lot of those are inappropriate.
Oh,
Or have you ever noticed a lot of them are anti-Mormon?
really?
Yeah, I've noticed that.
I have ad
So
blockers on my browser, so I
yeah,
don't see
I
'em.
do too. I don't see ads. You're right.
Yeah.
I do too. But I think it's interesting. Obviously, the church has no control over what pops up. I just think it's interesting. I I have ad blocker because I hate those ads. I hate
Yeah,
those
I
things
hate
that
them.
pop up. I'm
Yeah.
completely opposed to it. So anyways, I thought that was interesting. Another thing that's semi-controversial that the church is invested in, I'm going to count here real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at least 10 companies heavily invested, like millions, almost over hundreds of millions of dollars in nuclear weapons contractors.
Whoa.
Mhm.
So would this though just be like Northrop Grumman and Boeing and things like that?
Boeing is a big one, Lockheed Martin is a big
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
Dynamics Labs, Northrop Grumman, yes, but I think some people don't like the fact that the church is investing so much money in nuclear weapons when we're supposed to be like a church,
Peace.
right? Peaceful.
Promoting peace.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's a little bit controversial. Um, I guess the church, like anybody who's using some other firm, right? They're using another firm to
Yeah.
decide what they're investing in and how they're making those investments. And
Yeah.
so what they have is a screen. It's called a screen to say like, "Hey, if any of the companies that we're investing in are involved in things that we're opposed to, we don't want to invest in that," right? Like it's
Mhm.
supposed to naturally protect them or shield them. So its screen has it blocks out things like alcohol, tobacco, coffee, gambling, pornography. So they're trying to
Mhm.
absolutely not invest in those things. But it doesn't screen or block things like apparently nuclear weapons, advertising, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
But
I don't have strong.
Boeing, like those companies do more than just nuclear weapons, right?
Sure.
They're government contractors, but
Mhm.
they also do plenty of private things that are not weapons and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah. I agree. And honestly, there's not gonna be anything that somebody's investing in that you're gonna be able to say like, "Oh, I 100% agree with every single one of those things." At the end of the day, they're taking a bet on things, but they are using somebody else to help them decide which things to bet on.
Mhm.
Yeah, anyway.
I wonder, are they not investing in things like gold and silver? Because I hear a lot of ads for investing in those things. I
Hmm,
wonder, like, is it wise for members of the church to say, "I'll just invest in the things the church invests in," and take that as a guide? Because
what do
it's
you think
not
about that?
inspired. They're not using inspiration to pick stocks, right? They're
No.
just using financial advisors.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
100%. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's
I
safe to
think
just say, like, "Whatever the church is investing in, I'm gonna invest in?"
I think wouldn't it be crazy if we found out the church had like billions and billions in crypto?
Mhm.
In fact, they have enough. They could just start their own crypto exchange, right? Because that
Sure.
stuff doesn't necessarily have to be reported in the same way as other things. So then it turns some whistleblowers like, by the way, the biggest player in crypto is the church.
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, my
that'd be
assumption
interesting.
is they're investing in a lot of things and that it appears to me that they've been successful in their investments so far, and they're, you know, doing it as wisely as they can. Yeah.
Okay, that's a big deal, Melissa. You changed my
Hey,
mind. You
cool,
persuaded me.
cool. Okay, cool.
Okay, here's my story. Elder Gilbert, who is the Commissioner of Church Education,
Okay.
recently spoke about how church schools are navigating a precarious time. Is that a
Hmm.
big deal, little deal, or no deal? Three, two, one. No
Little
deal.
deal.
Yeah.
I said little deal because of this one thing, Matt, that you
Mm-hmm.
taught me. How much of our church budget overall goes into church schools? It's
Yeah.
surprisingly big amount of the church's budget, and so for that reason, I think things having to do with church schools are at least a little bit of a deal.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay,
that persuades me.
tell me the
Um,
story.
So I don't know that this stuff is new, but Elder Gilbert is the kind of guy who likes to forge relationships and build like groups of people that are going to work together on common causes.
Okay,
And
that's
so
good.
there are religious colleges all throughout the United States. Georgetown University is a church school. We talked before about the punter for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he spoke at St. Augustine College, which is a Catholic school. So there's a
Okay.
lot of faith-based colleges in the country. And on the other hand, there are people that feel like federal dollars for education should not be given to faith-based schools if they don't promote equality, which many times is translated as like LGBTQ plus equality. And so
Okay.
church schools in the United States are fearful that the time's going to come in the near future that if they have things like the BYU Idaho Honor Code or things like that, that they'll lose federal funding, which much of the institution doesn't need federal funding, but students who get Pell Grants or Stafford loans, they need
Mm,
that funding. And so there's this concern that some people will say, hey, you can't have students get Pell Grants or federal loans to go to your school unless you change your honor codes to fit with these like federal guidelines that maybe violate their code of conduct or code of morality.
I see.
So this is all about creating a commission of faith-based universities to sort of create a team of people that can help combat that sort of thing in the future.
I
Which
see.
is why I said no deal, just because I don't see that as that much of a threat. But, you know,
Well, the
I don't
like,
teach
for
in the I
example,
don't
BYU has a gay straight alliance, right?
yeah.
And their honor code doesn't say you can't be LGBTQ, right? It says you can't,
You
um,
can't practice. So if
outside of
you
marriage or
no, at all, right?
I
You could
see.
get kicked
Okay.
out for or yeah, so it's unclear, but the
Okay.
law of chastity favors heterosexual relationships, at least the way that the honor codes, the CES honor code
Okay.
favors heterosexual relationships. And so some would say that's unequal. And so then they would challenge that.
I see. I see. I just wonder if it's, um, I don't know, sketchy for us to lump ourselves with all other faith-based universities because our policies aren't necessarily the same as theirs
Our
in
goals aren't
regards
the
to a lot
same
of
as
these.
theirs, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to tell him how to do his calling, but that's kind of why I said little deal because but again, he probably sees things that I don't see. He worries
Well,
about
yeah.
things that,
I think
yeah,
the wording of this article, "A precarious time," is probably exactly right.
yeah.
Um, but I do think also that it needs to be dealt with, it needs to be thought about, and if at the end of the day, you have to choose between federal funding and your honor code, I'd be interested to see what choice we make because as we all know from previous rants, I have a lot of issues with the honor code. Like, I have a lot of issues with it, and there's things that I think need to go away, but it's a private school, and they get to make their decisions, and people go there and knowing fully what's expected of them, so
I talked with somebody about this a while ago. I don't want to say who because I don't. It doesn't matter. But
okay.
the church's perpetual education fund
Mhm,
created a foundation, like a way that the church has seen, we actually could do this where students could get loans to go to church schools without relying on federal funding. So if the
mhm.
church schools needed to just opt out of federal funding because the federal government is telling them to do something they don't think is appropriate, the church could do it. It would be hard. It would kind of change the way some things are at some of the church schools, and so people would probably rather just keep the status quo. But if that were to happen, it wouldn't be the end of the church schools because there are ways that the church could get around that, and that people have
Yeah,
already thought about that sort of thing. So, from my perspective, I say I don't think we need to join like Melissa Prop 8 in California. We joined a coalition of other religions to fight same-sex marriage in California,
mhm,
and we took the PR hit. All of the other
mhm,
faith-based groups as part of that coalition didn't take the PR hit. We took it, and we became labeled as the church that hates gay people.
mhm.
And I don't think it was good for us. And
Yeah,
we weren't far and away. We were not the majority group in that alliance, but we're the ones that took the blame for it when people were mad about it.
interesting. Yeah, I guess I kind of lean the other direction because I love the need for a church school. I love having a place where faithful saints can go and be educated together and can, meet each other and collaborate with each other and make connections. I think all of that is really, really cool. But I also think that there is a need for us to also be a part of the world, right?
Hmm.
BYU has a reputation as being a really good university. And
Hmm.
if we pull ourselves tighter into this religious corner and pull ourselves away from, things that other colleges expect, then I think we pull us outside of our ability to then be a part of the world. And I think it's important for us to be a part of the world, both
Yeah.
academically and religiously. So I would rather see us to get in line with things that are going to make us able to compete on a national level.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean we have to give up our priorities, but it does mean that, yeah, I don't want us to go tighter into a corner, holding really, really tightly onto things that maybe just aren't that important. Like, having beards, not that important. Anyways.
So, because I'm a political scientist, And my dissertation advisor, he's like the world's foremost expert on LGBTQ politics.
Uh-huh.
So he runs in these circles with political scientists at various universities who are really active in this kind of stuff. And one time I was having lunch with a bunch of these people, and they were talking about what could we do to force these religious institutions to be more open and accepting of gay people and things like that. And my
Mhm.
advisor kind of points to me and he's like, well, Matt actually is at one of those church schools. Why don't we ask him? And
Uh-huh.
so then they're like throwing all of these ideas at me and like saying, okay, what if we did this? What if we did this? How would your institution react? And I said, listen, you have to understand that if I start drinking coffee on a regular basis, I'm going to get fired from my job.
Yeah.
So when you're saying to somebody who can't drink coffee, what would the church do if we were to ask you to change your doctrine in order to get federal funding? I can tell you right now, they're not
Mm.
afraid of you. They're not
Mhm.
worried about like your pressure that you're putting on them isn't going to make them change at all. And
Interesting.
sometimes I think that if instead of forming a coalition of like-minded individuals, you form a coalition of people who don't have all of the same ideas, you can sometimes get further along because they can
Yeah.
understand the church isn't being anti-gay in their policies. They're just upholding their beliefs. And like what you're calling anti-gay is also anti-coffee. It's also anti-cigarette, anti-vaping. It's like there's a whole world of things that we're not allowed to do, and you're like cherry picking on one thing that you think is bad, trying to get them to change that when it's a part of this whole bigger thing that you guys just don't understand.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's related to your next story. I
Yeah.
think.
So I think, yeah. So BYU sports may have to make some big adjustments. Big
Okay.
deal.
Okay.
That's the headline.
Okay. Wait, sorry. Okay.
BYU sports may have some big adjustments to make.
Okay.
Big deal, little deal, no deal. Three, two, one. No
Little
deal.
deal. I don't
Well,
care a
so the
whit about BYU sports. I don't know anything
yeah.
about them. I don't care. But is it the same kind of a thought? Like, I don't know. Explain it to me.
Well,
Like,
it's different.
oh, okay.
So there's a Supreme Court ruling. No, sorry. There's a settlement between the NCAA and colleges and universities
Oh, so
that
this has to do
says
with
that
racism?
no, paying
Oh.
athletes, paying
Oh,
athletes.
NCAA paying
Yeah,
athletes. Okay, okay, start over. Okay,
yeah.
got it.
So up until now, it's been against the rules for a university to pay students to play college sports. But now there's an agreement that says that a school can pay up to $26 million dollars a year to pay student athletes to play sports at their school.
Okay.
And
It
and
turns out
that's
I do have an opinion on this.
oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
keep
so
going,
that's
keep
going to
going.
cause changes at BYU, right? Because you're already spending the money for BYU is supposed to be about education. Are we really going to spend $26 million dollars a year for BYU sports so that they can be competitive in the collegiate athletics? Or do they say, hey, we're not going to be competitive anymore? We're going to keep our teams, but we're just going to accept losing to University of Utah every year and just get used to that.
Interesting. Okay, okay. Well, I 100% think college athletes should be paid. I've always thought
Yeah,
that. I think the schools make so much money off of them. And for so long, they haven't even gotten scholarships. A lot of the team doesn't even get college paid for. It's just like
yeah,
maybe 10% of the team that gets college paid for. And then they're making so much money off of them. And like they're working their athletes very hard, right? Like
yeah.
their bodies are taking a lot of damage. And anyways, I mean, I know that it's an honor and it's difficult to become a college athlete. But regardless of the sport you're playing, I think you should get paid. Now, the amount you should get paid, I think that's maybe a little bit controversial in this story. And I understand that BYU works hard to keep tuition low and that maybe they can't, afford to pay athletes. But my understanding about BYU athletes is the reason they get so many good athletes is because those athletes want to go to BYU. They want to go to a church school, and that's why they're picking BYU. Not because they don't also have an offer at another good school. They do typically, but they want to go to BYU.
But there are college quarterbacks that are making more money than NFL quarterbacks.
Great. If
And
they can
so,
make it, I say let them.
but
Good
BYU
for them.
probably won't be able to pay that kind of money. So
Good.
BYU would not have the best athletes because they'll say, I
Mhm.
love BYU, but I love making money a little bit more.
But I think that's fine. I mean, BYU Idaho, BYU Hawaii, they don't even have sports programs. Like
right?
it doesn't have to be a thing at church schools.
You're a University of Utah fan who wants to
Yeah.
see BYU lose.
And I wanna see the Utes get a lot of great athletes and pay for them,
They will.
including gymnasts and track stars. They're sending
Yeah.
so many people to the Olympics from the University of Utah. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's pay them. I'm down
Okay.
for it. And if that means BYU sports dies, sorry, Cougar fans. Wah, wah. Okay. Well, send your hate mail to contacts@thisweekinmormons.com. Okay. Speaking of sports, do you know who Jabari Parker is?
Yes, I love him so much.
Okay, good. This is my headline then. Well-known LDS basketball star Jabari Parker is struggling. Big deal, little
Mhm.
deal, no deal. 3, 2, 1.
Big
Little
deal.
deal. Okay. I'll also take it as a big deal. So Jabari Parker, about 10 years ago, I think he was number 2 picked in the NBA draft, like back
He
in
was
2014.
by the
Um,
Milwaukee Bucks.
Yes, faithful member of the church, really
Yes.
cute kid. I remember just, like, loving Jabari Parker back in the day.
Yeah.
He did play professional in the NBA, he did okay, but he was, like, supposed to be, like, the next LeBron, like, he was supposed to
Yes.
be really good, but
He's
he did have a lot of injuries, he struggled a little bit, and now he's been sent to, I think, Spain, to Barcelona,
yeah,
and
Barcelona.
has been playing in the European League for a while, and it hasn't been going awesome. He's still struggling with injuries. So this story actually, it's listener, you might want to click on the link. He actually started crying in an interview after his last game in
Yeah.
the European League, just asking about, like how his career has gone, how he's dealing with all of his, I guess, lack of success and injuries. And yeah, he got really emotional, started crying, and listen, I agree. I love Jabari. I want him to be successful. Guess what? Not everybody is. Not everything in life goes how you think it's going to go. In fact, most things don't. I like that he was vulnerable. I
Yep.
like that the press didn't pick him apart for it and said they were like, man, this has got to be rough. And it has got to be rough.
Yep. That's why I say big deal.
Okay.
Oftentimes from athletes, you see like this macho attitude where they're not honest
Mm,
about how they really feel. And so to me, it's a big deal. Jabari Parker has always been, in my opinion, a tremendously good advocate for the church and representative of the church. And in this instance, I think is another one where he's like just being honest about how he feels and who he is, and that's
yeah.
good for everybody because he had enormous expectations, and he has failed to live up to it for various reasons. And just the weight of all that, it should make a person cry sometimes. It should cause them to feel sad and break down. So big deal to me because he was willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. And his career's not over. He's got a
No.
lot of life ahead of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my story is a new project titled Saints at War includes tales from LDS church leaders.
Okay.
Big deal, little deal, no deal. 3, 2, 1.
No
Big deal.
deal.
It
Yeah, we're
really is.
so opposite.
It really is no deal. I only said big deal because do you remember that old TV show MASH
Yeah.
about the medics in the Korean War?
Never watched it, hated it. Yeah, but it was
Oh,
huge. Yeah.
well, it turns out that Russell M. Nelson, when he was a young man during the Korean War, would
Mhm.
go travel around to all of those MASH units and give them advice on how to do better. And then he would come back and report like what they could do better. So there
Yeah,
are
that's
photos,
cool.
yeah, of President Nelson doing MASH stuff. We're working with MASH doctors back in the day.
Oh,
That's the only
really?
reason I said big deal.
Okay, well, the reason I said no deal is because I hate history and everybody knows it. Like, "Wah, I don't really care." I mean, I don't
But
care.
But this weekend is where we celebrate the invasion in Normandy Beach. It's 80 years since
Oh,
all of those Americans gave their lives in Normandy, and
uh-huh.
there's only a handful of them left because 80 years means that if you were there, you're like 100 years old now. And so there's a lot of people trying to like commemorate the
Okay.
sacrifices of these young people.
Okay, listen, I'm not anti-war veterans. I absolutely appreciate it. I think it's cool that, the church is always doing things to preserve history, to preserve people's stories, and, I think it's a good thing to do. I'm just not ever gonna read it. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
What's your story?
Okay, so my story is called 3 Types of LDS Faithful. Is there really room for everyone in the church? Big deal, little deal, no deal. 3, 2, 1.
Big deal.
Little deal. Oh, good. Okay,
Well,
good.
it's a big deal to me because I didn't know there were only 3 types of faithful people.
I mean, to be fair, do you know who Gordon Monson is?
Yeah.
And he's a writer for the Salt Lake Tribune, and he's a little bit snarky, but
Yeah.
I like his work because I think that he's honest, and I think that he has an interesting approach. So this
Yeah.
is just really his opinion, but I do like it for a couple of reasons. First of all, I one of the biggest things I care about is that everybody feels welcome in our church.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest things I hate is that sometimes we push people away out, we push people out, we make them feel unwelcome, and we think we are acting in a loving way. So we think, hey, what I need to do is stand up for Jesus. I've been taught that I need to be a missionary, right? And I need to love everyone. And the way that I'm going to love people is to make sure they know that if they aren't doing things right, they might not get to heaven. And so
Mhm.
we think we're acting out of love, but what the person receives is judgment and
Mhm.
negativity. And you actually, if you don't behave a certain way, don't belong with us. And
Mhm.
that is my biggest problem in the church and something that I fight against. And so the reason I like this story is because it's just kind of talking about like the different kinds of people who are in the church and do they all feel like they belong? Do you want to guess the types of people in the church, Matt? Just guess what this article says they
Okay,
are.
these are faithful, right? 3
Yeah,
types of faithful members of the
in
church.
currently in like in your ward. Yes,
Uh-huh.
who go to church. Yes.
So I don't know how I would label it, but I would say there's the people that are, like, super diligent about everything,
Okay, he calls them the automatics.
okay?
Okay, so yeah,
There's
you're
the
right. Those are the people who like do everything the prophet says to do. He says this is funny. If the apostle Jeffrey Holland says to pull out a metaphorical musket, then in the name of Moses, they're going to pull out the muskets, right?
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
musket talk
I know
offended
people
a
like
lot of
that.
people, but nope, the automatics, like they're like, okay, got it, got it. So yeah, okay, they're
'Kay. Then there's the faithful people in my ward who, come to everything, but really, really hope they're never asked to do anything.
Oh, interesting. Okay, he would call those the suspicious. Okay.
Mhm.
So these are people who are hanging on and on the edge of heading out. Okay.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
they're not slipping away because they're not strong enough, because they're not faithful enough. It's because they either don't want to cause a stir, they don't, like you said, want to be like fully involved in the social aspects of church,
Mhm.
or they feel a little bit pushed out.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
And
what would
then
you
I know
say?
people so then there are people that I know that never come to church and never do
Okay,
anything, but
okay,
in their heads, they are the most committed, faithful they do missionary work.
okay,
They do, like, all of the extras, they just don't come to church.
okay. That group is not addressed here. What he
Oh,
calls
okay.
the 3rd group is the contemplatives, okay?
Mm.
So they still worship, they still believe, but, they have a lot of questions, right? That make what he calls the automatics that makes them nervous. So they wonder about things like the historical problems of the church. They wonder about the way that we treat LGBTQ people.
Mhm.
They when they bear their testimony, they say, "I hope," or "I feel," not "I absolutely believe," right? They have
Mhm.
problems with things like temple garments, with, the role of women in the church, right? They
Mhm.
have questions, they have problems, but they have faith, right? And they're
Mhm.
still serving and in leadership, but they just they're not automatics, right? They're not
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Anyways,
And so I think I wanna first emphasize that I love all of those kinds of people, and they're all welcome in the church.
yeah,
But I do think that there's something that I in my experience with, we'll just call them the automatics,
okay.
they have all the same questions that all the other people do.
Mhm,
They just do this. They just say, "That's a question not for this life," and they just put it on a bookshelf that they're gonna answer
put it
sometime
in
in
a
the next
box.
life. Mhm. And
Interesting.
so they actually feel really uncomfortable with the people who are questioning everything all the time because they feel like those people are not being faithful because they're asking all of these questions. And their approach to the questions is just put it off. Well, I can't worry about that. I know what I know, and I'm going to forget about everything else. Whereas
Mhm.
other people who aren't comfortable with that want to know the answers to these questions. And so that's why I think sometimes it creates this challenge, right? This friction,
Right,
because
because we also have this doctrine where it's like, we should question things, right? The church started with a question. And so
Mhm.
people who are of the questioning and wanting answers and not able to just like accept things or just put things aside, they feel like historically they haven't been able to say those things. And now it's much more a part of church is being able to say, like, I don't know if I do believe every single thing, or I do have some questions about things. And yeah, I could see how that could be a little bit of a conflict within a ward.
It's always been fun to me as I've lived in different places to see the variety of ways in which people live their faith as members of the church. But as my children grow older and grow into adulthood, it's even more fascinating, right?
Mhm.
Because when kids get older, they feel much more comfortable telling you all of the wrong things that you did when they were younger.
Right. Yeah.
And they say, "This is how I live my faith." And you just have to be okay with it as a parent, right? It's not like you can tell them, "No, you can't live your faith that way." It's like, "No." And then they just sort of let you know at the same time, by the way, like, your behavior on this and this and this is completely inappropriate. So I don't know. I just think it's
Mhm.
kind of fun
Mhm.
when there's people you love a lot and feel very close to them, and you watch how they live or approach the gospel differently. It kind of helps you be a little more open minded about how everybody else lives their faith. It's kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
do what you got to do.
Well, and the other thing that I think is interesting is that we work so hard on missionary work to bring people into the church. And we say things like, your past is your past, and we're willing to forgive all of that, right? But then we don't do that with people who are already in the church. We don't say, like, it's okay that you think differently or you believe differently or you have questions. Like, we want you here. It's weird that we don't do that with people who are already in the church.
Yeah.
I just think it's
Yeah, we're really hard on ourselves. Yeah, Melissa, this actually shows up in surveys where you can ask people like their feelings about groups in society. And
uh-huh.
so if you ask evangelical Protestants what they think about evangelical Protestants, they're like, we love ourselves. And you can
Mhm.
ask Republicans what they think about Republicans. They're like, we love ourselves. You ask members of our church what they think about other members of our church, and they're kind of like, man, I'm not sure if I we're very weird that way, right? Because we will let everybody in, but once they're in, we're not sure we really want you around all that much, which
Yeah,
is kind
well,
of a weird thing.
yeah, I couldn't disagree more with that take. I just like, there's nothing I love more than a Sunday school class where people have the freedom to say, "I think differently. I look at that differently. I read the scripture differently." Like, for example, Matt, there's been times where I've heard you talk about the family proclamation and interpret it in a completely different way than I do. And to me,
Mhm.
that's not coming against me, right? That is just another perspective that I'm really interested to think about. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter if I ever agree with that perspective, right? So
Yeah.
it's like I love a Sunday school class where we're all able to say, like, hey, we have this one scripture or this one document or this one prophet that we're looking at, and we can all come to different conclusions. And that's awesome. It's totally good.
But I will say, Melissa, there are times when I'm in Sunday school and I bring up a movie that I watched that I probably shouldn't be watching
Oh,
because of the
uh-huh.
content.
Mhm.
And I even preface it with this in the class. I say, I'm not endorsing this movie. I probably shouldn't watch it. Some of you are more righteous than me, and you'll never watch this show. But this is what I learned. And I can just tell that some people are like, yeah, you shouldn't have watched that show, and you shouldn't be bringing it up in church.
Yeah, and there's gonna be judgy people, and I even
Mhm.
though those are the people that I think we don't need in our church, we need them too. We need them
We
too.
do.
There's
We need
gonna be
everybody.
judgy people. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't let it
Okay.
bother you. Okay.
Well, speaking of people who have left the faith,
Okay.
the father of Mormon cinema, his name is Richard Dutcher,
Okay, yeah.
reflects on career and the industry he created and why he left the faith.
Hmm,
Is that a
okay.
big deal, little deal, or no deal? Three, two, one. No
Little
deal.
deal.
Yeah. So
I
for people who
didn't know
don't
Richard
remember,
Dutcher had left the faith.
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
He's the one that did God's Army, and then he did God's Army 2, and then he did that movie Brigham City.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I think between Brigham City and God's Army 2 is when he left the church.
Okay,
But
okay.
again, Richard Dutcher, I'm happy for him where he's at in his life and what he's doing. He says he's closer to Jesus now than he was when he was a member of the church, and
Mhm.
He'll talk about he's very open and public about talking about his experience leaving the church and why he left the church. And if
Mhm.
people are interested, you can click on the link and read the story. But again, maybe he's not in the church now. Maybe he comes back. Whatever. I have no hard feelings to Richard Dutcher and
Yeah.
leaving the church.
Yeah, it's the same way I feel about, David Archuleta, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the reasons he left the church are very valid for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's still, according to him, on a faith journey. That sounds like it's what Richard Dutcher is saying too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still on a faith journey. I still have a relationship with my savior. To me, it's like, great, tell me about it. Like, tell me about it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy to hear about it. It doesn't change the way that I feel about things. And if I'm not willing to listen to how you feel about things, then, you know, why does it matter? But yeah, so I'm interested to hear about that. I'm glad that you feel comfortable talking about that. And again, if Richard Dutcher or David Archuleta had never been members of the church, we would treat them differently than we do.
I know. I'm kind of
Why?
salty at them for leaving.
Yeah, why? Can we not
Yeah.
still treat them like we would if they had never been in the church? Like, yeah.
It's weird to me, like over the course of people's lives, I've noticed a lot of people come in and out of the church and in and out of activity. And
Mm,
just because somebody leaves today doesn't mean they're never coming back. I mean, they may not come back, but a lot of people leave and then come back. And
mhm,
but we do think of them differently. We think of Oliver Cowdery very differently because he was in the church, then he left the church, and then he came back to the church. And it's like,
mhm.
maybe you never should have left.
Yeah.
And whereas it's like, who cares? He came back. Martin Harris, same thing, right? Left and then came back. We do
And
think of him
maybe
differently.
you don't learn what you need to learn and become who you need to become, which is more like God, without taking that journey, right?
Yeah,
Like, I can't judge where you need to be to learn what you need to learn to become who you want to become. Like,
yeah,
that's not my job to decide what that path is. So,
yeah.
okay, Matt, I'm gonna skip my last story, and we're
Okay,
gonna jump to Twim Takes because I feel like it's gonna take a minute to get through Twim Takes today, and I want to give us time, and
okay,
I don't even know what I'm gonna think about this, but I'll let you bring it up.
okay. So Donald Trump was recently convicted of 34 felonies.
Mhm.
And as a result, a lot of people have been out there doing surveys. And one of the
Okay.
groups that did surveys specifically was trying to target they were trying to target people of faith. And so they have a decent sized sample of how members of our church responded to Donald Trump's conviction.
Okay.
And it turns out that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like all other religious Americans, view Trump's actions as immoral.
His
S
actions that he got convicted for? Are we
Yeah,
specifically talking about those
the
actions?
hush money. They
Okay.
say the hush money was immoral. There's 59% of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints say that the actions detailed in the trial were morally wrong.
Okay.
So, paying hush money to a porn star or whatever.
Okay.
At the same time, 57% of Latter-day Saints said that they did not believe that he committed a crime, and only 39% agree with jurors that he broke the law.
Okay, so Latter-day Saints majority believe that Donald Trump, who is currently running for president, acted immorally, but although he was convicted of a felony, he did not commit a crime.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're
Okay.
not necessarily the same people, right? You could say it's
Oh,
immoral and he committed a crime, right?
okay.
But the
Okay.
numbers are roughly the same.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I think it's the reason we're talking about it on This Week in Mormons is because it's unusual to get a perspective of members of our church about something so topical in the news right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
But at the same time, it just says to me that most members of our church are Republicans. Because if I look at polls of what Republicans say, it's almost the same. It's stronger, right? So you're going to get something like 80 or 90% of Republicans that say he didn't break the law instead of 57% of Latter-day Saints that say he didn't break the law.
Okay.
Um, so I guess, but it does. I mean, to me, it says that they're not thinking about this as a religious question. They're really thinking about it as a political question, and it's politics that's kind of guiding their thinking on it more
Hmm.
than faith.
Well, so I guess to me, when we look at all of this, the question is is it okay to vote for someone that you feel is immoral?
I would
And
say
maybe
no.
you feel like both candidates are immoral. I don't know. I'm not saying specifically
Yeah.
Trump, but I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is it okay for you to vote for someone that you feel like on some issues is immoral, maybe?
Yeah. I would never do that. I would never vote for a person that I thought was immoral for president of the United States. However, I know lots of people that do,
Okay.
because they say nobody's perfect and we're not voting for a prophet. We're just voting for a president.
Mhm.
And even if I disagree with his morals, I support his policies. And so I'll vote for the policies and not the person. Lots of
Okay.
people make that argument. I just
Okay.
wouldn't do it.
And so we're not even talking about a convicted felon. We're just talking about you guys have said that he's immoral, but
Hmm.
will you still vote for him?
Yeah.
Right?
And a lot of them still will.
Okay. And have we had any direction from prophets or scriptures regarding this issue? Because it seems like we have. Like, it seems like it's
Sure.
fairly clear that, like, I feel like the last election, and again, this isn't my field of study, but I feel like the
Yeah.
last election, didn't we get like a talk over the pulpit or a letter over the pulpit that said, please vote for somebody who is a good person? Something like
Um,
that? Help me out. Help me out.
well, I will say so. Dallin H. Oaks gave a talk on the Constitution.
Yes.
And he said that no party advocates all of the righteous things all the time. So
Sure.
sometimes you have to vote for somebody that you don't like all of their policies, but because you like some of their policies,
But isn't
right?
that also when he said, "Don't vote straight ticket, just
Yeah,
look
he
at the
did say that.
person"?
He did
Yeah,
say that.
yeah.
I'm finding this verse in the Doctrine and Covenants
Okay,
because
that's
it's
fine. I'll
yeah.
talk for a second. Here's the thing, I don't think I if I'm only looking at morality, I don't think I could vote for either of the top candidates for president right now. I personally don't feel like either one of them is completely moral. If I'm looking
Mm.
at any person in the entire world, though, maybe with the exception of my husband, because he's pretty much the most moral person I've ever met, I don't think I could look at anybody and say they're absolutely moral. Like I'm in line with everything that they are in line with morally. So, I don't know that that can be my measure. So what I'm saying is when an LDS person says to me like, "I don't think he's moral, but I'm gonna vote for him anyway," I can understand how they would get there. I
Yeah,
can understand that. Yeah.
yeah. So the
Um,
verse I'll
Go
read you
ahead.
the verse that I always use as my guide. So it's Doctrine and Covenants 98 verses 9 and 10.
Mhm.
It says, "Nevertheless, when the wicked rule, the people mourn. Wherefore, honest men," now he says men, I think we can vote for women too.
Okay.
"Honest men and wise men should be sought for diligently, and good men and wise men ye should observe to uphold. Otherwise, whatsoever is more than or less than these cometh of evil." So he says we should look for honest, wise, good people. So I use that as my
Okay.
guides. So if,
Okay.
in my opinion, a person is not honest, good, or wise, I would not vote for them, no matter how much I agreed with them on policy, because I ask myself, could I find somebody else who
Mhm.
has the same views that is honest, good, and wise? And if
Mhm.
I say I could find somebody else, then I have an obligation to not vote for that person so that I can support the people who are honest, good, and wise that would also support my positions on policies.
Okay, and what if you cannot find someone else?
Then
Like,
I
do you just say it's better not to vote? Because I don't think it's better not to vote. Do
no, so
you?
like if it were me, let's say that I was a Republican and I was like, I'm really interested in conservative principles and I feel like Donald Trump is not a moral good, whatever. I would
Mhm,
say Mike Pence is, and Mike Pence is going to support the same policies Donald Trump would. So I would just write in Mike Pence's name.
mhm. Interesting. Would
Because
you
then
actually though? Because as a political science professor, you know that does no good.
listen, Melissa, voting at all in a presidential election does no good. It's all a symbolic act.
Mhm,
Like the probability that your vote is going to matter in a presidential election is so small. So the
mhm.
fact that you're going and participating in the election at all is a symbolic act. So shouldn't you then embrace your principles of all times in these symbolic acts that don't really mean that much?
Hmm,
Shouldn't you really embrace your principles? Because if let's say a whole bunch of people in Utah were to like decide we like we don't like the immoral guy, we want some other Republican, that would actually get reported in the news that and so won the state of Utah, or so and so won the state of Idaho, but
Mhm.
there was this huge protest vote for this individual
Hmm.
because Utah wanted to let people know that this is the kind of person they're looking for. And
Interesting.
that actually could matter more than
Mhm.
just choosing between one of two people you don't really like.
Mhm. Okay, and then do you think this principle applies outside of United States politics?
Oh, for sure. I think it
Mhm.
does for sure.
Mhm.
In fact, so to me, this is the principle. If you're going to live in a democracy, this is the principle you go by, right?
Yeah.
I actually have good friends with whom I disagree on everything about politics, but
Mhm.
I know that they're good and honest people. And so to me, I will support them. I'll do everything I can to get them in office because it doesn't really matter in the end, like if they agree with me about policy, because I can't anticipate the problems that are going to happen in the future. So all that matters to me is, does this person share my values, see the world the way I do, think the things are important that I think are important, and then I'm going to just trust them to do the right thing with whatever things come up in the future. It doesn't matter to me what they say to me, what they would do, or all, because they rarely have the chance to actually do the things they say they're going to
Or
do.
the power to do so. Yeah.
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 So to me, it's all about, are you a good person?
Good. Okay. Hey, that was fun. I like hearing your perspective because, I think it's a more educated perspective. I do think this is an issue that a lot of LDS people are going to be grappling with, like as it
Yeah.
comes time to make decisions on election, not just presidential, but all elections. So yeah, I think it's important to figure out what your guiding principle is, in relation to these things. So cool. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, I'm going to share one thing from this week in Mormon history.
Okay.
I have more in the show notes, and there's some really kind of fascinating things that would
Okay.
maybe cause longer discussion, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to just
Okay.
choose the shorter one.
Okay.
55 years ago, this week, 1969,
Okay.
New York Times reports that the LDS Church has preferred charges against Lamar E.K. for embezzling $604,000 while an employee of the church's auditing department. This,
Whoa.
le- this legal and publicized action is a departure from the previous church policy not to disclose embezzlements, and
Hmm.
K received a 20-year sentence.
Hmm.
Think of that.
Interesting.
How
So,
much money did the church have in 1969? Probably not a ton, right?
yeah,
And this guy took $600,000 from the church.
and only got a 20-year sentence. He's
Six
out
hundred
now.
thousand, six
He's out
hundred
now.
thousand dollars in 1969. Like that's just
Yeah.
a ton of money, right?
But to me, what's interesting is that before they did not disclose embezzlement.
I know.
That's
It could
interesting.
This could not be, maybe it's not the first time it ever happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't like the whole story. To me is just
Yeah.
fascinating. Like, how do you steal that much from your church? How
Yeah.
does the church like
Well,
not see
maybe
it?
are employees of the church auditing department, do they have to be members of the church?
They do now. You have to have a temple recommend.
Okay.
So, but maybe not then.
I
I
don't
don't.
know.
There's so much about how the church worked back then that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But
Every time I
yeah.
say I hate history, you go and make it interesting. Good job.
Hey, well, listener, that's all we have for this week. Just a couple of things we want to remind you of in closing.
Uh-huh.
First, we have an active social media page. You can follow us on Facebook. Um, you can follow us on Twitter at The Real Twim. You can always send us an email. Melissa has been particularly nasty this week to some of you.
Oh,
I don't know. If you're a BYU sports fan, I think she wants to hear about what you're.
nope.
You can send us an email at contact@thisweekinmormons.com. Also, you can become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/thisweekinmormons. And Melissa, we have been having so much fun doing interviews.
We've put out a lot of good interviews recently. I really liked our interview that dropped this week is with Taylor. He was a neighbor of Chad Daybell and
Mm-hmm.
also just like a really interesting, thoughtful young man. That was a great interview. But also our one we did with Cameron
Sahar.
Staley.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so,
Cameron
well,
Staley.
so Cameron, he's a therapist, and I loved his approach to all things. He was an Absolutely fascinating interview. And then, yeah, we interviewed Sahar, a Palestinian Christian, and she had so many great insights. So if you haven't been listening to those, catch up. I think you'll really enjoy them. And if you have somebody that you'd like us to interview, we've got a couple more that we're going to be dropping in the next few weeks. But if you have suggestions, we'd be happy to reach out to people.
Thank you for listening to the original Mormon / Latter-day Saint News podcast. We'll talk to you again in a month. Well,
Yeah.
have a good day, everybody.